All right, hey everybody, it's Monday, June 22nd, 2026. We are on show number 104, so I appreciate you tuning in. For those that don't know, my name is Luther, and I am a real estate professional here in the Kansas City market. And over the last 15 plus years, it's been my MO to help people invest in real estate. I've been able to do some investing on my own. And, you know, that's what this channel is about. So if you're tuned in, again, thank you. I'd imagine that you are interested in real estate, or maybe you've been investing for a while and you're looking to learn and grow, okay? And part of what I do here is to educate, inspire, and collaborate. So tap in, right? So I am continuing a series talking about what I do as a real estate practitioner. On the last 2 or 3 episodes, I dug in a little bit more about, you know, what I've done throughout the years as far as networking, learning, marketing, and so forth. And then I got into what I do as part of the process when I take a lead or when I get a lead. There's lots of referrals in this business, lots of connecting and reconnecting and dishing out opportunities to people who might, you know, be able to assist, right? For the last few years especially, I've been more, I guess, in tune or thinking more about how I can stay more in my lane and more concise. And so, okay, so besides the marketing and networking, the education, getting the leads, processing the leads, dishing them out, on the last couple of videos, I talked more so on what I do in particular when I actually take on a client, because there's only a few scenarios where I will actually sign an agreement to take on a client. One of which is if I'm helping them with a seller finance transaction. Most of the time that's going to be a resale. The other time I'll sign an agreement with a client is if it's a buyer that wants me to assist them or represent them to buy a property or buy a home. And then the third thing that I'm going to get into today is when I take on a client who is going to be my business partner. Okay, so as a real estate investor throughout the years, especially the last like 6-7 years, I've partnered with more people to invest in real estate. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. So how does that look, right? As I meet investors, as I talk with people about what I do, there's different ways that people can get involved. And one of my favorite things to do is to work with an investor who has capital that they want to place or invest, and they want to partner or collaborate with me. That's one of my favorite things to do, because I feel like I'm able to really shine and go to work using my resources, talent, skills, knowledge, and abilities, and that sort of thing. So how does that look, right? If I'm going to go into business with a partner who wants to invest in real estate, you know, they usually have a certain amount of capital that they want to deploy, right? So one of the first things that I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to communicate with them to determine if, you know, if we're even on the same page, because I have a certain way of investing that has kind of shifted and evolved throughout the years. And as I mentioned on the last video, if the client, the investor, has certain things in their mind or certain expectations that I believe don't really align with what I believe is a good way to invest or what I believe will truly work, then I'm going to either respectfully decline or I'm going to refer them out, okay? And so, you know, assuming that I talk with the investor, we want to partner, we're on the same page about how we're going to go do that, right? Then we're going to put an LLC together. So I'm going to reach out to an attorney. There's one in particular that has helped formulate most of my entities. And I'm going to connect my soon-to-be business partner or investment partner with that attorney, and the attorney's gonna, ask us a series of questions about what our plans are. And then from there, the attorney's gonna formulate all of the LLC docs. There's multiple documents that need to be completed depending on, where we're planning to invest and do business, okay? Some of my entities that I have and have had were formulated in the state of Kansas, and others were formulated in the state of Missouri, okay? So then from there, once my business partner and I have a game plan, we have the LLC, usually my business partner puts a certain amount of money into a business bank account, right? So before I can do that, I need to gather up the LLC documents. I'm going to take that to the bank, right? And then I'm going to open up the business bank account. And then from there, my business partner can proceed to put money into the business bank account, right? Then from there, right, I'm going to proceed to look for opportunities. And as I've mentioned on previous videos, if you have, seen some of my stuff on social media, you know that I'm adamant about when I work with an investor or a buyer that they need to have at least a couple of their ducks lined up in a row before we even start looking, before I even start sending them leads, before I get in my car and drive across town type of thing. So that means that based on the capital, the strategy and operations, right? Based on the amount of capital that my client or my partner wants to deploy and the strategy that we're going to utilize, right? We're going to more often than not have to leverage that capital, meaning that we're going to have to get some type of loan, some type of investor mortgage that's going to be in first lien position, right? So it could be something where we leverage it, the capital that is, with some type of short-term debt or hard money loan. And in that case, we're going to, look for opportunities that are either deeply discounted or they are in need of upgrades and repairs, which in that case is going to need to be an even bigger discount. And then those are the types of opportunities that I'm going to seek out. On the other hand, depending on the investor, their risk tolerance, how much capital they have to deploy, I may look at going more of the turnkey or traditional property route, or a house. In our case, single family home investments is our go-to. A single family home investment that may be ready to go, and we're going to look at putting 20 to 30% down and then getting to it from there. So for, context, when I've partnered with investors, almost all of them have opted to go the first route, where we take on a renovation project. So when I've done that, right, we find a good opportunity, we buy the property, we're leveraging it with hard money or some type of short-term debt, as I mentioned. Then we got to get through the renovation process. So that's a massive part of what I do too. I am going to coordinate, right? At this point, if we've acquired the property, I have already established the initial scope of work, and there's a good chance that I have met my general contractor or the rehab crew leader at that property at least once, okay, before we even bought the property. I have the initial scope of work and I have met that contractor at least one time at that property to get the ball rolling, okay? Once we've acquired the property, then we're gonna start on the renovation project, and depending on, how we want to move through that process and how I can coordinate with that contractor, right? Sometimes, depending on the project size, right, the contractor will go ahead and get started on the project, which means that they are essentially fronting at least a portion of the material costs and the labor for themselves and their crew to get the project rolling. Well, You know, again, like people have done whole series. I've talked about rehab projects on some of the past videos that I've done, and I put that in the operations category. As I said before, capital, strategy, operations, it all has to flow together. Not kind of, it all has to work together, okay? So part of what I do, a massive part of it, is overseeing that renovation project, coordinating with the crew leader or the general contractor, making sure that when they say that they have gotten to a certain point, they've completed certain tasks, I'm on site at that project at least once or twice a week until that property is sold or occupied. And you have to understand, in some cases, I've been on site at a property for 2 to 3 months. And in other cases, once we've acquired the property, I've been on site at least once a week on average for sometimes a year, just on that one property. Because even once we get through the renovation project, right, and the contractors are settled, we were able to coordinate the gap funds and get the draws from the lender, right? That's a whole series, right? Don't get me started on that, right? But once we get through the renovation project, the contractors are settled, the lender's waiting on us, right, to either resell the property or to refinance to pay the lender off. And during this time, the house is vacant. I'm not leaving that house vacant, you know, for very long. It's just not a smart thing to do. So that's a huge part of what I do. Then from there, most of the time we ended up refinancing, paying off the hard money lender or the private money lender and the short-term debt holder, right? And then from there, I proceed to find a seller finance buyer, which I have talked to y'all or talked about on previous videos and social media in detail about that process. So I'm marketing the property, I'm coordinating with certain agents who have helped us in the past, they kind of specialize in seller finance buyers. So I coordinate with them, I'm marketing word of mouth, I might do an email blast, I might individually text 10, 20, 30 people, and then I'm going to post that information on the various social media platforms that I have too. Then from there, once we find the buyer, right, I may need to show that property a few times, right? I need to coordinate with the agents, with the potential residents and so forth. We coordinate that closing. That's a whole nother transaction, right? Again, part of the purpose of me wanting to do this series talking about what I do as a practitioner, so my partners and my clients, future investors, those investing who want to expand or grow or outsource can be able to do so in a better manner, more efficiently, so that you have a better understanding of all that goes through the process. I've gotten frustrated numerous times through this process, and now if I'm going to do that with a partner or a client, this is why I charge higher fees now. Okay, so I know this is going to resonate with a lot of people out there. So that's huge. That's what I've done numerous times when I partner with a capital investor or an investment partner, getting through that process. And then once we have transacted on the seller finance transaction, right, the residents are in the home, this stuff continues. There's no stopping. The operations will not stop as long as we own investment properties. So I am, in essence, the CEO of that investment firm. So I'm the point person, I'm the person that the residents or the tenants communicate with. And, you know, that's a whole laundry list of items that we could go through as well. But there's ongoing management, even as we do seller finance transactions. It's minimal compared to what the oversight or the operations or management would be if we were doing rentals of some sort. But we still have to service what are considered these notes, because when we do seller financing, there are, you know, paper assets that get created. And I don't want to get too far off track, but that's part of my role too, is to oversee the investment company and to service those notes, because There are times when our residents get off track. There have been very few incidences lately where we end up dealing with a default and we have to work with the residents as they move out. You know, sometimes we may need to, you know, coordinate with an attorney to, you know, get possession of the property. And then from there, we can decide if we want to rinse and repeat or if we want to exit and sell the property. But again, that's on me, which is why, you know, it's so important that I'm on the same page with my investors, because as I'm working with a business partner, a capital investor, they're putting up the money. That's pretty much all they have to do. At my investment partners, they put up the money, they sign for the loans, they sign documents periodically, and then the rest is on me. So, you know, in my mind, it's fun because I get to do what I enjoy doing as a real estate pro. And it's a little bit more passive, not completely passive, but definitely a lot more passive for my partners and clients who allow us to go through that process. So that's it. I appreciate you tuning in. I think that pretty much puts a bow on it for now, talking about what I do as a real estate practitioner. Again, we're here in the Kansas City market, so keep us in mind if you are looking to buy or sell here in the Kansas City area, if you have a general real estate need, and especially if you're looking to do seller financing or creative financing transactions of some sort, as that's one of our specialties, reach out. All right, again, thanks for tuning in. Have a blessed one. Peace, y'all.